Girls on Tour is a book club that aims to keep us connected while shining a light on some badass women and gender diverse people within the entertainment industry. Touring can be incredibly boring and sometimes very isolating. Having stories to connect over can make us feel close no matter how far apart we are. We tried to film this once before and I was outrageously unwell. I had like questions that I wanted to ask you and all of these things, and then I was just like, do you like book? And we would have like a small amount of conversation led entirely by Matilda, which was then interrupted every
5 minutes
by me going, okay, I need to go throw up, and then I would go be sick. So Matilda has very kindly come back to do this again.
Far less concerned this time, which is good. I feel like maybe the thoughts will flow a little better now that I know I'm not just like holding space for you while you were fighting for your life.
And I really appreciate you for holding that space. Thank you so much.
I always will. Thank you for having me.
Anytime, but specifically this time, because this is the Girls on Tour book club. This is the non-fiction part of the book club. You are the first guest.
What an honor. Thank you.
Everyone else has to now reach the standard of you.
Okay, well, I'll try and keep it low then.
One of the things that I have always wanted to do, other than finding a way to make excuses for myself to read more, is I've always wanted to use the channel as a way to give representation for women in the industry. And for those of us who in the entertainment industry didn't have a lot of people that looked like us to look up to, which if you're a woman, if you are a person of color, if you are a non-gender conforming person, you don't have those examples. And while I've been able to tell a lot of my own story, I've been trying to figure out how I tell or give platform to tell the stories of others as well. And then when the book club idea happened, my tiny mind imploded. And here we are. We have read a book together. The book is an autobiography by Tana Douglas, who is an Australian roadie. She started her career being the touring sound engineer / general roadie for AC/DC as a teenager, and then it only gets more crazy from there. She's worked with every big band of the 80s, 90s that anyone's ever known. She's worked on some absolutely crazy level productions, including at like Buckingham Palace and things like that.
Definitely became world famous.
Reading the book was like the first time that I had an experience where I was like, oh my God, I want to be them when I grow up. I grew up around a lot of like young guys who wanted to be musicians. They all had their Jimi Hendrix, their I want to be Robert Plant. You know, they had their musicians that they looked up to and they wanted to be like, and they were like, I want to be just like them. And I never had that experience. I had to become that for myself and be like, what do I want?
Yeah, well,
and then
so did
figure it out. And now we did that. This is an opportunity for us to show younger women that there's someone doing what they want to do. And hopefully we have in some way contributed to creating an easier pathway for them to be in the industry. We met on a really tiny amateur production, Hamilton, Australia.
Really underground, might not have heard of it.
Yeah, you might not have ever heard of it. We met doing Hamilton. After immediately becoming two halves of the same brain cell, we then moved on and did the Phantom of the Opera production on Sydney Harbour that was outdoor together.
Yeah, we did. That was a whole kind of chaos. We were only half prepared for, I think.
And then we did an indoor production of Phantom together as well. So we've done a couple of shows together. If you were to give like a rundown of your career thus far.
I can try. Going from large commercial musical theatre show to show has been the last 6 or 7 years of my life now. But it started growing up around theatre, growing up backstage though, because both of my parents were / are in the industry, one as a musician and one as a stagehand turned resident director. Now he's kind of working with Sydney Festival and is not a resident director anymore.
Sure,
less creative and more technical side again. So kind of done a full circle. Anyway, so I always knew that backstage existed and I almost was more interested in that area of it from the start because that's where I'd kind of grown up, in green rooms, side of stage, that kind of thing. So I guess it was kind of a natural progression towards working in that industry, even though I didn't plan it. It was a summer holiday job after I graduated high school that I got from a family friend. So kind of was influenced by the fact my family was in the industry. We had family friends who also worked for Opera Australia.
Slight nepotism.
Nepotism light was it was painting flats in a warehouse, very glamorous, for 2 months the summer after high school.
What show was that for?
That was for a Hosh production of Carmen in 2017.
They've probably done 3 times since then.
Oh yes. Yeah. No, Carmen I think was the first Hosh. That was the first production they did on the harbour, the floating stage. All those flats were going to build like the kiosks and stuff around the outdoor production. And it was my crew boss at the time, Pablo, at the warehouse, who said...
Was he your crew boss?
He was the family friend.
Oh,
yeah, he
no
was the family
way.
friend. So he was working on the show that these flats were going to go towards. And he said, hey, Matilda, are you free after this? Because they need follow spots. They need local crew. To crew such a big production that only happens for 6 weeks at the start of the year. I worked with a lot of backpackers were there on the bump in, kind of people who are a bit more transient, aren't necessarily in the industry. It's a lot of it can be an entry level for some people doing some of those roles, especially the bump in roles and the follow spotting roles. Like I think 3 out of 6 of us were new. Like we hadn't ever really done it before. That was my first gig. An incredible state-of-the-art opera on the harbour and little 18-year-old me trying to learn on the job. So it was kind of like trial by fire, trial by rain.
The follow spotting positions for the harbour shows, I had a video of the day that we had really crazy wind at Phantom and you could see the whole thing moving.
It was like a 7 or 10 metre truss straight up from the ground with a box at the top that somebody sits in. Hell of a first show, but definitely was a good one for me to see and kind of, it got me pretty addicted to doing large scale shows because there's just so much going on. It feels like organised chaos. It feels like you're a tiny little part. I felt extremely tiny, tiny little cog in a huge machine. And then the product of all of that hard work is so incredible and large scale, and the audience is so big and the applause is huge, and there's just a lot of pride in doing something so massive. I guess, similarly to doing huge rock concerts and things, even if you feel like you've only run a few cables or pressed a few buttons on a console, suddenly the product of what people appreciate is so massive. That's, that feeling is addictive and really fun. So from there, I did a few depth swing covering other follow spot positions when the head follow spot who taught me everything I know really about follow spotting on that first gig, she was going away to stage manage a show for a few weeks and needed me to come and sub in. Like she called me up and said, hey, you were great on Hosh. Do you want to come and cover me for a few weeks at the Capitol Theatre doing the ballet? So I did some work with the Australian Ballet and then also on My Fair Lady, which was directly after the ballet. She was away for 4 weeks. So I did the subbed in on the head follow spot position at the Capitol at 18, which was just really chill and fun. And I think at the time I was definitely very nervous about it, but then because I don't know, you just kind of start doing it and you get used to it. It's incredible how quickly you can take for granted the skills you have and the job you do, especially when you learn on the job. You're kind of not able to quantify exactly what you've learned how to do because it's just, you're just doing it now. And especially with live theatre, you're either doing it or you're not. There's competent and there's not competent. So as soon as I was competent, I kept getting gigs, and from there I've mostly worked in lighting, but I've just jumped show to show in Sydney and then now a little bit in Melbourne. I've gone on tour, mostly doing lighting, but also doing some props, meching. I guess I've always had that learn on the job thing since that's how I started. So every show I do, I'm trying to learn something new. So jumping into other departments has been really fun. But currently touring in lighting.
With
Moulin Rouge.
Which also, as a show for lighting,
lots of lights.
Watching the little reels that they do of the deconstructing and the constructing of the theatres makes me want to cry for you every time. For those who haven't seen Moulin Rouge or even just seen photos of the theatres you go into, the whole theatre is transformed basically.
It's all a theme. We love a theme. We've got lights in the dress circle, in the stalls, front of house, as well as just, behind the proscenium of the stage, which is fun. I don't know. It's probably the biggest production that I've worked on in terms of the amount of lighting that we're working with.
Considering the list for the name drops we've already had, Phantom of the Opera, indoor and outdoor, Hamilton.
I mean, there's big prestige as well with those shows, but definitely practically lights-wise and kind of every department-wise, it's like the vibe is just more is more. So there's always something that needs to be fixed or made better, or working on a year-long tour, you'd hope you'd kind of settle into things, but it always seems like there's something new, which is exactly the vibe that I like. So I'm very, very lucky to be doing what I'm doing.
One of the things that I've always loved about being a tech is that you never know everything. Even if you think you know everything, there's going to be an upgrade in some kind of technology. There's a new method of doing something that someone works out. Like, it's not the kind of job that you can go into, you learn up to a certain point and then you're like, well, I'm done. I've done everything I need to know and now I have nothing else to learn, because I really like learning new things. And like you were saying about learning on the job, I'm so glad that has been my preference. I did go to university, but it was not a great time, which I've talked about before, and I felt like I didn't learn pretty much anything in comparison to what I felt like I learned on the job from someone going, you need to do this, and me going, And how do I do that exactly? And then them explaining it to me and taking on the wisdom and skills of older, more experienced people who were willing to teach me how to do something. If there's anything you can be in this industry, I think you should try and be teachable, because that is how you
Absolutely.
That is how you progress. That is how you learn. If people like that they can show you something once and then leave you to it, that is how they take you to other jobs and you get other shows. And like you said, it's hard to quantify your skill set. I feel like, especially when I was first starting out in the industry, I never was like, no, I can't do that. My answer was, if you show me how to do it, I'll do it. Like, I kind of went in with a blind fake it till you make it kind of confidence, because I was like, I've got no fucking clue what I'm doing, but I want to be
fake
here.
It till you make it. Like, nobody knows exactly what we're going to need to put on a show until we get there, kind of thing. There is obviously so much pre-planning and so much documentation that goes into doing a large-scale musical theatre show that's often inherited from overseas, so we're trying to replicate it exactly the same way. But it's never going to be exactly the same. It's going to be in a new venue with a new crew, with new cast,
a different amount of domes.
Exactly. There are always going to be things that'll have to change. So being flexible is just comes with the territory. So yeah, having that kind of rigid mentality of having done it a certain way at uni can hold people back sometimes when they get into the industry. But that's, I think, more speaks to the kind of person than the fact that, you know, that there are courses you can do. I think they can be a great way to get into the industry, because some people really find a community there, and then you can go into the industry with your cohort. So it makes that social aspect of even just getting the first job easier sometimes if you know someone who's been in the industry already through that course. But yeah, I think the people who do best, like you said, are people who can learn and who can also teach, because you're always going to be expected. Like, I've regurgitated every single thing. Every single thing I've ever learned about theatre, I've then told somebody else. You know, everything I've ever like absorbed from my cohort on each show, every new thing that comes up, every strange specific little thing that needs to be, you know, troubleshooted, that is so niche and could never be, you know, put on a piece of paper, could never be taught in a course. That weird little niche thing I did on Hamilton that one time in Bump In, I then bring to the table when we're doing Moulin Rouge Bump In, and I go, oh, we needed to rig a light at that funky angle before when we did it back there in Sydney at the Lyric Theatre, but now we're here in Melbourne at the Region. Let's use this kind of knot because that worked for us then, so I'm gonna, you know, that's what I can bring. But I never would have known that if it weren't for being on the first show. So it's just
snowballs.
It snowballs a bit, yeah.
Do you ever wish that you'd done any study? Was there ever a point where you were like, maybe I should go to university, or were you just too busy being booked and blessed?
Well, I mean, I definitely didn't know what I wanted to do after high school, so I didn't have that planning to be. There wasn't anything at university that particularly interested me. It was only kind of when I ended up in the industry, which I'm so grateful for to have just kind of fallen into it, that I realized how great it was and that this could be something that I, you know, wanted to do long term. It's taken me a while. It took me a good couple of years to really feel confident in myself and in what I could bring to the table as somebody in the industry, because I kind of felt like I'd gotten there by accident. I had a bit of imposter syndrome with it, and you can feel that regardless because everything's so new and you're always in a new team with new people who don't know you. You kind of have to back yourself and say, no, I'm qualified. That basis of understanding and that confidence that comes with having done a course, I didn't really have that. And the social, you kind of get a practice, a trial run. If you do things like NIDA or VCA or WAPA where you're putting on productions but in a safe environment with no audience at first, you know, that kind of, or a small audience of supportive friends and family, you kind of get a trial run at some of the things you might run into professionally in workplace relationships and also socially with friendships and things between, because it's such a social industry. Getting used to the dynamics was, I kind of had to do it by trial and error.
Before I had confidence in my ability, I had confidence in my desire to learn. You only had to show it to me once. So even if like someone explains, and I still do it now, if someone explains something to me and I don't get it, I'm like, can you say it again, but a little bit dumber? Like, just dumb it down a little bit.
But that takes backing yourself and that takes confidence. I feel like there were bump-ins I do where I felt like not confident enough to put my hand up and say I don't understand. So the kind of like fake it till you make it, like maybe I would be told something and then I'd go off and I'd do it wrong. And I've now learned how annoying that is when running a crew, when you have people that'll say, yep, got it. And then half an hour later you're like, so how's it going? And they're like, oh, I couldn't do it.
Oh my God. If there is any tip that I can give anyone who's just starting out, it's when you don't know what you're doing, say something. Don't just wing it, because everything, especially in a bump in, you've got not just your department, but you've got like 6 other departments who are all working at the same pace in different ways to get everything done that we need to in probably not enough time. If you do something incorrectly and you don't tell anyone, or you don't make sure that you're doing the right thing, when it is found out later, not if, when it is found out later that that thing hasn't been done correctly, it could put you back days, because someone will have to undo it, redo it. You might have to get another department to undo something that they've done so that you can redo what needs to be redone, and it's never worth it. I would rather appear stupid than feel like I've set the production back by days.
Absolutely. It's never embarrassing to ask for help. That took me a long time to learn, to be honest. And I
especially
feel
as a woman, because you go into that space already having to, I always felt like I had to prove myself no matter what. Like I'd walk into bump-ins or walk into gigs with either by myself or with men who have the same experience as me or less, and I still felt like I had to prove that I could do the job because their assumption is that I couldn't. Especially working in a small venue doing like gigs with bands, people would rock up and be like, where's the sound guy? And I'd be like, hello, hi, it's me, the sound guy. The amount of times I heard people say like, oh, I've never had a female engineer before.
And then suddenly you're representing women everywhere and you have to really look like you know what you're doing. And that's what Tana talks about in the book too, of like starting doing gigs, almost had it be a benefit for her at first to kind of like weasel in and sit next to the sound console and be like, I'm a cute girl, I'm just here to watch la la la. But then eventually, you know, she was the one behind the console, but obviously that transition was difficult.
When you were saying that you feel like you accidentally like fell into the industry, I think that happens to a lot of people, and it definitely happened to her. Like she talks about just wanting to be part of all these great stories and these great things. Like she ends up in Sydney because she follows a guy who's tightrope walking across high things, including the Harbour Bridge. She becomes part of his crew because she's bored, gets to Sydney, and then is in the Cross just hanging out doing things, and then ends up at a gig and is like, what's all of this? And this guy fucks something up and I'm interested about that, and just kind of falls into it. There's a particular kind of person who ends up, especially in production, in theatre. I don't think many of us dream of being a head mech.
People don't know it exists until they get there.
And then you find where you fit in the puzzle piece of just wanting to be part of something that, like you said before, is like big and sparkly and impressive, and it's such a rush to get there because it's so many little parts of such a large machine that is so impressive and so fun, but is also a lot of hard work, which makes you more proud of it because you put so much effort into it. I have a question about your family. As we touched previously, you have parents who've been in the industry and who've been backstage. What was their reaction to you becoming part of it, or especially to you going on tour? Because I feel like a lot of people, their parents view this industry, whether you're on stage or not, as not a viable career option because they don't understand it. And if you're going to go on tour, they're like, oh, the touring part of the industry, let alone just working in it, is super confusing. So were they like really supportive of it? Did they have tips for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I am a special case in the way that I didn't have to convince my not in the creative industry parents that working in the arts was a real option, because they knew that. That's what they both did. So I think their reaction was more of support, but also of caution, because they had both been there and done that. They struggled in their own way of the touring lifestyle and brought me up on tour some of the time.
Your mum tells a great story about being pregnant with you while she was playing Phantom.
A shout out to my mum, but also, you know, Monique being incredibly passionate in wanting to talk to her at a party of mine. My mum definitely had a couple wines and was just enthralled to know that Monique loved Phantom, you know, the same way that I did, grew up listening to the songs and that kind of thing. And so she just launched into this story of doing I think it was a Lloyd Webber tribute concert. So there were some songs from Phantom and some from Cats and that kind of thing, but it was, you know, the big Phantom chords on the organ would be the start. And my mum was in the horn section, and the rest of the brass, like the trombones, would sit in front of her. And because they weren't playing during that bit, they had the opportunity of reaching back in the dark in the pit and feeling my mum's pregnant stomach, because I would kick with the big chords, because the big loud music, it would always make me go berserk in the same thing every night for the whole tour. So they would turn around and go, oh, yeah, she's kicking again. Phantom Tragic from day.
Is exactly your vibe still.
From before day one.
People get pretty desensitized, I think, very quickly to like the magic of the shows that we do from an audience perspective, which is super easy because first of all, half the time we never see the shows we do from out the front. Like if you get a chance to actually watch the show you're on, it's kind of a miracle. Like you have to be swung out, or no one's going to get a day off on a working day and come back to the
unless
show.
you're in lighting, like unless you're follow spotting,
True.
then you get sick of watching
Very
the same show
true.
every day. And I mean, you're not watching, you're participating, like you are doing the show, but
yeah, same for the person mixing as well.
like
I
you
guess.
either get dead sick of it or you covered it as something very exciting because you're constantly backstage on deck. So it's like there's no in between.
There was a real joy that I had sharing Hosh, like the Phantom that we did outside with you, because I was so excited. Phantom was my favorite show. Working on it was like a dream come true. It was also my first full-time mic tech role. I'd only been a swing before then.
That's crazy to me.
I just remember when we did that run where we watched like the chandelier go up for the first time, just us like holding hands, having this moment. It was just really beautiful to share that show with somebody else who was equally as romantic about it and was appreciative of what we were doing and not just like, we're wet and there's tools
it's
in the
not just
harbour.
a job, you know, to us, especially in that moment, it wasn't just a job. Like it was a full circle achievement. It was something we were so proud of and so excited to be a part of. And I feel like that can kind of wear off so quickly sometimes. You can get so jaded with this industry because it is so physically demanding and mentally tiring. Sometimes you're not paid enough. Often you're not paid enough. It's so insecure in terms of having job security and things. I feel like most of my parents' reaction when I said I wanted to tour was run. Don't. Yeah. Please. Where they knew exactly what the trials and tribulations of it would be, but they also knew that there is a great passion that you feel for it. And that's kind of largely the only reason that we're mad enough to keep doing it, right? Sometimes.
I think it's also really interesting that there's been this flip for people who'd be in like your parents' generation starting, or even like Tana. There was no job security and there was no money in the industry at all. Whereas doing what we're doing right now, which is commercial musical theatre in Australia, going on tour is an opportunity to make income like they never could have imagined.
Yeah, well, it's kind of the most secure job we can get because we know the tour will go for a year or more and we'll be employed the whole time. It's not like 3 months of guaranteed work. It's, 18 or more.
I don't know about you, but per diems is the only reason I've ever had any savings ever. I lived paycheck to paycheck up until I started doing theatre purely because per diems and having that regular, consistent work has given me a security that I've never had anywhere else.
Have we explained what per diems are?
Yes, I did a whole video about it. You can go see it on my channel, which I think is interesting because, like you said, your parents were like, oh my gosh, it's not secure. For me, getting offered what was at the time almost 2-year contract touring where most of the time I'd be earning per diems, and that's my opportunity to save up for something large. That's my, it was like this is my opportunity to save and make an income that I couldn't make anywhere else at my age with the skills that I have. Like you said, it's so hard to quantify our skill set. The state of like festivals is a bit shoddy at the moment in Australia because of all the regulations around the cost of things. Small venues are closing down everywhere.
Well, it's hard to make a profit from live shows usually because they cost so much money to put on. Yeah. So when a company intends on putting on shows for years, they have obviously a lot of security in that way and they want to contract people and keep them. So they give us the incentives and then there's a great award for full-time employees on tour as well. So it's kind of the closest we can get to, I don't know, having been doing it in Melbourne for a year in the same theatre, same thing every day. It's kind of the closest I've ever felt to like having a normal person job, working corporate or working in an office. It's like, well, here we are. Gigging, being a gigging tech and going place to place every week or even every day, that's very, very different. And I haven't done a lot of that. I've mostly worked in the large scale commercial productions.
I've done so much like small venue work. When I started working in theatre, when I got the swing role on Hamilton and on Come From Away, I was like, 6 days a week? What? Because up until that point, I'd managed a venue and tech directed a venue, which was a full-time gig, basically, more than that. And then I went back into freelancing. I have to book up my week worth of shows, which wasn't that hard, but if there were no shows, there was no work. Like, it wasn't up to me when or if I made money to a degree. It was like you have to pick and choose what jobs you accept and don't accept, but you also have to consider that you don't have a lot of options. Like, I only have a certain window of time where I can make money.
Yeah, well, you have to take work where you can get it as well. You're your own boss freelancing. It's very hard to know when to take a day off when you've got like a rigid 8-show a week schedule like I have. Like, we work 6 days a week, but we always have Mondays off, and I never have to feel guilty about having time off. But friends who are, swinging different shows or who are doing, more freelance work like that, you kind of end up just working yourself to the bone because you don't know when the work's going to run out or when it's going to come back again if you do lose it. I mean, even working on commercial musicals, COVID suddenly meant that I was unemployed again. I still couldn't fall back on a company that was employing me because the company ceased to exist as soon as the shutdown happened. So
which company was that?
Come From Away.
Oh yeah, you were on Come From Away too.
We were going to go to China, ironically. That was our international tour planned for 2020.
Come From Away went through it with COVID as well. I think they had a lockdown in every single city they went to. Or even when I swung it in Sydney, we had a 4-month lockdown.
I didn't go back to Come From Away because I was then picked up by Disney. But yeah, I did 6 weeks in Melbourne to prep for China. And then was the first thing to be canned. The insecurity of the workplace, we must love it if we keep coming back to it. And if someone like Tana can blaze the way with all of the trials and tribulations of having her child on tour and then not being able to look after them because of the demands of her lifestyle, like, I don't know, being a single person touring, I think is something my parents are very supportive of. They appreciate how having me and my sister grow up while they each took turns touring was difficult, and it was something that they managed really well. And we had a brilliant time, and remember visiting dad in Adelaide and visiting dad in Taiwan and visiting mum in Singapore. Those were the only times that they saw us for those few months. If you've got the stability of the work, you have the instability of your like social life and your family life, so it's kind of double-edged in that
and it gets
way.
to a point, I think, where you don't have a lot of options. Like, I was talking to a woman I work with. I was talking to her about how they managed having kids, because she was a performer and then kind of had to stop because she wanted to have kids. They wanted to have a family. He's not around that much, but him not being around that much means that she can stay at home with the kids and look after them, and they have to choose, like, okay, well, who's working, who's not. There comes a point where you don't have much of a choice, and I think about that all the time because, like you said, and like Tana talks about in her book, there's not a lot of space for having a family unless someone sacrifices their career. I know a lot of people who manage to tour their families when they're very young. Like, you can take a baby wherever and it doesn't matter. You can take a toddler to Asia, you can take a toddler to Adelaide, whatever. But once your kid is at like school age, you have to make a choice.
Yeah,
like,
and that's what my parents did. They did stop. Dad would still go and do an opera season in Melbourne, like most years, but they couldn't maintain both doing the 8-show a week schedule. It just had to stop, and mum was the one who stopped as well.
Have you ever talked to her about her feelings about that?
Only a little bit. I feel like she doesn't want to kind of take away from the magic of the times we had when we got to visit. And I know it is hard for her to talk about as well.
I'm sure it was so difficult for her to have you guys.
She's a French horn player, so she was kind of more in that freelance, a few gigs this week, not so many this week, that kind of thing. And that kind of thing was more, easy to maintain. But when she got an 8-show a week touring contract with Oliver, that was when we went to Singapore when I was about 4. I think that was probably the last long tour that she did while we were growing up, because after that we were in Sydney at home and we were going to school and stuff, so couldn't have both parents away, so dad would be the one to go on tour. And I know she loved spending that time with us, and she did still work as a muso, and we were babysat sometimes, but mostly she was home with us in the evenings, and that meant she couldn't do shows anymore. I know that's been hard for her, and her career's been kind of, she's gone on to get a PhD, which is incredible, but yeah, I know it has been hard for her thinking about playing and stuff. She's always saying, I wish I want to be playing more and stuff like that. And whenever she does get it, because she plays with the Police Band and a few other bands and stuff, she deps for people on shows sometimes as well, at places like the Hayes and things. Now that we're older, of course, she can do that, but there was definitely a period there where I know they had to make a big decision in terms of both of their careers, and it ended with dad staying with his because he was paid more being a resident director with Opera Australia, and she was a freelance musician that was a little bit less sustainable. People do have to make a choice, even like having a partner, like your long distance, that's really difficult. And so many people I know that tour a lot that do have partners, unless you're luckily on the same show and you can bunk together and really make those per diems work for you, you end up just away from everyone when you go on tour. You're in your little bubble of the people you work with, and your family, partner, friends, whoever else are completely separate from you, so it's definitely can take a toll, so you better love it.
That is, for me, the hard part is being away. Weirdly, not so much Thai. Like, I think we've done whole videos about it, go check them out. We both tour and work in this industry, so there was no way our relationship wasn't going to be long distance, whether it was with each other or someone else.
And you started that way.
And we started that way, which made it easier. Like, we knew what we were getting into. The fact that we both tour, not a problem, because someone was always going to be touring, and I think there's an understanding because we're both away, whereas I think if one person was at home and one was off touring, then that would be a bit. Right now I'm at an apartment that we've shared for the last 6 months since he finished Hamilton the last time. He's just left to go on tour again, and I'm here alone in this house full of all of our trinkets and all of our memories by myself.
And you're like,
and I'm
when will he
weeping.
return?
I'm like, when will my husband return from the war?
Meanwhile, you're also touring.
This is technically part of the tour. We've just been in Sydney for so long that, like you were saying about Rouge, it feels like having a day job, normal person job almost, from and rinse and repeat. We're doing the same thing, even though it's never the same.
But not for long.
Not for long. And then I'm going to go away, which was a discussion when he was offered or asked to go back to Hamilton. The discussion of, okay, well, how are we going to make our relationship work in the meantime? It was kind of like, well, I'm already going to be on tour, so you may as well. It's not like like I was planning to stay at home and we were going to live together every day anyway. So he may as well tour at the same time too, which was a great opportunity for him to make a good income, me to make a good income, an excuse for us to go visit each other in the places that we're going to. When we talk about what our future looks like, it's hard to consider things like, especially for me, I've always had really, really hard pendulum swing feelings about having children for personal reasons, but also because how the fuck does that fit in my life?
Yeah. Well, it would have to change.
I would have to change my career. There is no way that I can see, if you can see, please leave it in the comments, where I could continue my work.
Not you crowdsourcing your 5-year plan from the comments of your
Please
YouTube videos.
help me. There's literally no possible way that I could see, first of all, anyone who would want to be pregnant and give birth and that's the way that they would like to have a family. I could not see how you could do that. There would have to be a point where you'd stop working because of the physical demand, and that would be so much earlier than I think a lot of kinds of jobs because of the physical demand. Like you couldn't do a bump in pregnant. Oh my God. Like it wouldn't happen. Could you even get in a harness pregnant? Is that allowed? And when I think about the idea of giving up my career, which of course people like your mum made sacrifices for their own career. And I'm sure that on the other side of it now, looking at it, she would never regret that choice because of you guys. But as someone making that choice from the opposite side, I think I would be resentful if I had to give up my career right now to become a parent.
And she probably is a little bit.
I'm sure that the experience of becoming a mum and living that life with you got rid of those feelings, but unless being a parent is your dream career, because let's be honest, it's a fucking career, unless that is your dream, sacrificing your other dream for that is a huge choice, especially as a woman, where without a doubt it will impact you more than it impacts your partner. If you have a male partner.
Tana pretty much kept her pregnancy and birth secret from the people she was touring with because she knew it would influence what they thought of her and influence her ability to get work if they knew she was pregnant or even had a kid. If there's anything else that she had to manage in her outside life and she wasn't committing her whole self to the tour and her job, she may as well just be replaceable. They'll find somebody who's more committed, somebody who's got more time on their hands, somebody who's ready and passionate to do it. That kind of instability, I feel like, makes us throw ourselves into our work and say, well, we've got to be here 100%. You're either competent or you're not. You're either there or you're not. Doing it halfway, there's not a lot of support for that. There's not a lot of support for maternity leave. There's a show tonight, you're either at the show or you're not. You kind of can't do this job halfway. So I feel like people do get a little bit stuck in it, like you said about, oh, what are you going to do now? Where are you going to go? How are you going to get another skill set or kind of work within the means of having a family? You're either kind of doing it or you're not. So it's an all-in kind of a job, and it is really a lifestyle, especially touring. So if you're in the touring lifestyle, it can be hard to imagine doing anything else because you kind of can't do anything else while you're doing it. People tour for decades. And I know people who make it work with families, but one of them, usually the woman, takes on a lot of that extra labor to make a touring lifestyle work, or even a lifestyle in the industry. It's so demanding.
Like you said, it's most often, from what we've all seen, let's be honest, we've all seen it. Even outside of this industry, it is often the woman that takes on the leadership within a family space and the most responsibility while men just go work. That having to sacrifice or be ready to sacrifice those parts of, I guess, womanhood. There are so many other ways I feel like I've been challenged in being a woman, being a feminine person, being in this industry. Even just the fact that we feel like we have to prove ourselves so much because there haven't been a lot of us, which in theatre, there are quite a lot of us now.
Now there are. Things have changed heaps since the events that happened in this book.
Massively. But even still, when I remember starting, not that long ago in the industry, I'm only 26. It's been less than a decade since I've been working full time as an adult in this industry. And I remember starting gigs and having the comments about meeting the band and she's just a girl and you can't lift anything, and the things that come along with being a woman in a male-dominated industry. But I remember meeting you being such a refreshing experience for me because I felt like for years I had to... Why am I getting emotional? I had to...
Get emotional with me, Monique. Also keep talking about how great it was to meet me. Please.
I feel like for years I locked away the feminine parts of myself and celebrating those parts of myself because I felt like if I didn't, I wouldn't be accepted by my peers.
Yeah, like you had to be one of the blokes, one of the guys.
I didn't want to look like I cared about my appearance. Anything to do with just being a woman, I felt like I had to become one of the boys to be accepted in the boys club. And I did that for a really long time. When I met you, you would come to work in dresses. And I was like, oh my God, someone who is so unashamed of their femininity.
I would always have pants in the venue just in case I need to go up in a genie. But definitely, yeah, I mean, you wear your blacks every day to and from work. You kind of see the loss of self-expression through doing the job day in, day out. And it was actually one of the mechanists that I worked with early on called Annika, who's the best. And she's a little older. She's been in the industry for decades. She's absolutely a queen. She definitely was a mech among an all-male crew. I'm sure she was the only woman in most of the shows that she did for the early, probably large part of her career.
Even now, I think there's not, in terms of departments in theatre, I still don't think there are a lot of female mechs in comparison to male mechs.
And she's a hugely revered, very well-known female mech and props person and stage manager in Sydney and in Australia, and she has such a legacy. And every Sunday she wears a skirt to work. It's Sunday dress day, and she coined it, and we were working on Jersey Boys together, and I saw her mopping the stage in a long skirt that she had tied up on her side, kind of like a sarong, and was then mopping the stage. So she didn't have any limitation in wearing her skirt. Obviously she changed into her show blacks for the show, but that was her reclamation on a completely male team. There were all male mechs on Jersey Boys. I don't think there were too many women on the Jersey Boys tour in terms of the crew, just, I don't know, maybe because it was a whole 6 years ago, but also just maybe by chance. But I remember knowing her for the Sydney season and loving it and wanting to get on board. And so I think there were about 5 or 6 of us that would wear dresses every Sunday with Annika. Since then, every show I've done, I try and wear a dress or a skirt on a Sunday because of her. And I just love that. There's kind of a solidarity. There has to be. If women are going to get anywhere, we have to do it together, and you can't blend in and do it the way that the men have always done it. That's not enough. Because like you said, you always have to prove yourself. So if you're going to, be part of a sisterhood, we're going to all do it together, and we're all going to wear skirts. Definitely clapped back against a lot of the, big, burly, blokey men's patriarchal standard of the industry and crewing, and also of the kind of taking yourself a bit too seriously, I mean, obviously we're going to make sure we're practicing safe work practices like WHS, and for the show we are absolutely wearing appropriate, well-fitting clothing that's not going to snag and catch in auto tracks, but having fun at work and making it a little silly and making it a little girly. It doesn't have to be the most intense, hardcore, rock metal, roadie culture gig, whatever. Like, we can do just the same thing.
People are literally
we can do the
doing
same
jazz
lifts.
hands. You can wear a skirt.
Yeah, it's like we're doing musical theatre, for heaven's sake. That kind of roadie mentality does bleed into all aspects of the industry in terms of crew, but it doesn't always have to be like that. Like, you can be sweet and sensitive and also a mech, and you can do it all in a skirt. So love that I was the person for you that Annika was for me.
Like we've acknowledged, it's not as great of a divide now for us as it was in the past for people like Tana because of women like Tana. Do you feel like there are any other ways that working in a male-dominated industry has impacted you, your work, you as a person?
I think definitely. I think in being taken seriously in positions of authority. I did my first tour having to call in to local follow spots in each city we went to. So I was in charge. I knew my gig, I knew my cues, and I had to do my cues while simultaneously calling to the other 2 operators on headsets. And I'd never done it before. I got given the role towards the end of the Sydney season kind of unexpectedly. And I had to, again, learn on the job, figure out how to call, write a script. I was doing the most, leaning into it, making sure I was ready and I could take on the responsibility of being in charge of the 3 of us. And we got to Brisbane, and the 2 local follow spot operators I happened to be working with were both men over 50.
My favourite trio.
Yeah. At first, I was a little nervous that they weren't going to take me very seriously. I had to kind of, not pull rank. Like, they were both lovely, but, one of them was a very experienced follow spot operator. I knew that walking into the room, he didn't quite trust that I was going to know what I was talking about, because obviously he's been a follow spot for so much longer. I don't know if gender really came into it as much, but listening to like a 19-year-old girly girl calling this, dude who has like a ponytail and like wears like black service shirts and like all this, he was a proper like old school roadie, and I don't know, maybe I put those gender roles onto him thinking that I was going to have a tough time. Actually, he ended up being really lovely when he found out that I had a script and I was prepared and I was ready, and we nailed it together. The other operator that I had was a lot less experienced, bless him, and I had to call him the entire season. like the entire season we were working together trying to make it work, make the show work with his ability. And I don't know, it actually gave me a lot of confidence being a woman in the industry in that context, going, you know, maybe it's going to be all right. Maybe if these two blokes in their 50s can respect me and work with me as a young woman in the industry, maybe we're on the right track. And maybe all you need to do is do the job. You're either doing it or you're not. And you're doing it regardless of your gender expression. You're doing it regardless of your age. That's what I kind of love about the industry, and that like definitely there are judgments and contexts in which you come in and you're not immediately going to be trusted the same. Being younger, being a woman, or being non-binary, you know, just like not being a cis white guy in his 40s, you know, that's who everybody looks at and trusts. But I've been in so many contexts in which women are the ones calling the shots, calling the show.
My experience of working with older men has been kind of similar in a lot of situations. It's always been younger guys who, if I ever had any problem, it was like guys in their 20s or early 30s. But like older, seasoned, roadie, blokey blokes with the ponytails and the Black Sabbath shirts have always been great to me. If I've shown them that I care about being there and that I'm ready to work hard, they've always been so lovely. Like you said, you showed up with a plan and a plot and you knew what you were talking about. And at that point, I've actually found those people really fun to work with because they make me feel respected and empowered while also offering me a little bit of their information, a little bit of their knowledge. It's usually been like that generation of roadies, of crew, were always quite welcoming.
Or maybe it's just the get shit done mentality. It's like, well, you're here as long as you're 100% committed and you're keen. That's all that matters. If you're keen, you're ready to learn. It doesn't matter, you know, what you look like, as long as you're safe and, you know, you're careful and you're doing the job. Like that's all that matters. And that's the true roadie mentality, I think. Culturally, I think we're in a really good place in the industry. We're in a good place to go really far for women in the industry, because anyone can do the job that we do. As long as you're here and you're keen and you're excited and you're switched on, you're ready to learn and you're prepared to teach. Like, it's about your attitude. It's really not about your gender at all. None of us are seen by anyone. It's not like the cast where you have to look a certain way or you have to present a certain way maybe to play a certain role, or you're cast based on what you look like or based on what gender expression you have. Backstage, no one fucking cares because nobody's looking. Nobody can see what we're doing. We're doing it in the dark. Our job is to be invisible. It's kind of liberating in a way to be in a team of completely diverse people. No matter things you can't change, what you can do together is the job. It's all about diversity and leaning on each other's differences, I think, in what you bring to the table. Those roadies that have done it for decades and the fresh eyes that have just written the script for the first time. We had a lot to teach each other because of how different we were. So I think gender definitely comes into that. The different way we express ourselves, the different way we might think because of the cultural implications of how we've grown up or how we've been listened to or not listened to, judged or not judged, working in a team, multitasking, all of these things can exist across the gender spectrum. And I don't think the cultural implications of sexism can stop us. God damn it. I think we can do it. I think it's going to be great.
To be technical, you've mentioned that Rouge is the most like chaotic lighting setup.
Definitely the most things light up, I think.
So I was going to say, what are the biggest shows, the biggest plot, the biggest setup, the biggest emotional, mental, physical skill demand? But all of yours have been pretty fucked, really. You started off at Hosh, so it can't really get much worse than that. You're getting rained on every day.
And I think that's why I do actually really like being thrown in the deep end. I like learning on the job. I get bored. I get complacent when I'm doing the same thing day in, day out. I'd rather be completely switched on and 100%
need to be
focused.
stimulated.
I appreciate change and difference. So big gigs, big tasks, big undertakings don't really scare me. I was really excited to start with Moulin Rouge because it is the biggest set on a show I've worked with. I mean, we've got over 300 moving lights and then many conventional fixtures. But beyond that, I think what's so massive and piecey is all of the set electrics, the entire proscenium and all of the stuff front of house like we talked about before. The set comes out past the stage, and everything has a light in it. So you kind of get very used to being versatile in the kinds of lights that you're working with, and it takes a big team to make it work. It doesn't feel big because we're a big team as well. So all of us working together has made it probably, one of the most fun gigs, definitely, to get to know. It's also the longest I've ever worked with a rig before. So knowing the ins and outs, knowing exactly how to travel. Yeah, I've worked on it over a year. The tour's been going for 2.5, but I've been there for half the time now, which is crazy to think about. So Moulin Rouge is probably the biggest.
2 years ago, we were still on Hamilton right now.
That's wild. Hamilton was one of the smallest. Like Hamilton did not have a particularly big rig at all. A lot of other challenges for sure in terms of the precision of the focus, and there's still obviously a lot to do, but I love the contrast between the gigs I've done. It's really great. What about you? What's the biggest gig you've done?
God, they all feel big for different reasons. I think that Tina's a real challenge sound-wise. As a mic tech, Tina is the most chaotic show I've ever done because we have not only a full normal mic plot, but we have all of our band on stage, and all of our band, or most of our band, are also on RF so that they can move freely around the stage. On top of that, we have this whole fucking microphone stand plot chaos. When I got given the paperwork, because when we do a show like this, we inherit plots and paperwork and the job we're meant to be doing from other countries and other places, Broadway, the West End, other tours. We then figure out what we're actually doing and use that as like inspiration to make our own plot, basically. What I've gathered from the plots that I was given for Tina is that there were more sound crew on every night. There was another mic tech on. From what I've gathered, it seemed like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, people from other Tinas, it seemed like there was the person operating, the person monitoring, who also then dealt with the mic stands that come up out of the basement, person on stands, and a normal mic plot, which is one more person full time than what we currently have. And that has just been wild.
Does often happen. We do a show that's been done on Broadway or the West End, somewhere that's a lot more established. They do it for years and they have a big in-house crew, and we do it with a skeleton crew. And you're looking at the plots going, well, that person can't be in two places at once. How did they make this work? And they had two people doing the one job.
Or they had different means within the theatres they were in. Like a lot of, especially like the Broadway or the West End, they sit in one theatre for however many years they do it. In Australia, if you're going on a long-term show, it's touring. Like there is no show that goes for multiple years that sits in one place except for maybe Harry Potter. You have to transport it to different...
tour.
Yeah, they're built to tour. Sometimes they're not built to tour,
but we tour
have
them
to
anyway.
Tour. If you look at productions of Tina around the world, the set walls and also a microphone comes out of the floor. In Australia, the walls slide on because the theatres we're in are not deep enough to cut into the floor and come up from underneath the stage. The microphone stand lift is not deep enough that you can set the mic and forget it. So a member of stage management, because sound are not on comms like everybody else, so I can't clear it and be on comms. It has to be someone from stage management. Also because I'm busy doing other cues. And this is one they can actually help with. Have to feed the mic up onto the platform and then let it rise. And they have to be there to collect it as well, which is a whole fucking time.
I hate that. Well, that, need an extra crew person here.
Figuring that out in tech was like, okay, great. Even figuring out who uses what mic stand. I've only been given this many, which the amount of times people have been like, why don't you just get more mic stands? And I'm like, first of all, that is so far above my pay grade to make a choice like that. Also, where am I pulling these transmitters out of? Am I changing the Broadway programming or are you? It's so much bigger than just, you can get an extra thing, because we are working within the limitations of a design someone made 10 years ago that every company since then has tried to replicate to the best of their ability. You don't get a lot of choice in those things. And a show like Tina was definitely a big learning curve in that sense.
But you love it, right?
But I love it. I do love it. And it's been really rewarding to have, like I said, Phantom was my first full-time You're the Mic Tech gig.
In the rain, no less.
In the rain. You've all seen the viral video of the torrential rain. Tina feels like I feel like I know what I'm doing a little bit. There's still other things that I get to learn, like I'm learning the mix and that kind of stuff, which is really fun. But coming on to Tina, I was like, I know what I'm doing, or I know how I want to go about it, which was really empowering. Doing Hosh was chaotic because it was probably the most chaotic production I've ever done.
And your first time being wholly responsible.
And my first time being wholly responsible, though I did have a lot of help from Shelley Lee, our sound designer, and Emily Adams, who is our engineer and head of department on the show, who are both incredible and taught me more than my brain cells can even comprehend. But I think about me being 19 and managing a small venue of 100 cap venue. I had no fucking idea what I was doing and I was fully winging it, or me going and working on my first Fringe festival and just having to pull solutions out of the fucking mud for things that have come up. It's hard to pick a biggest or a most complex, because for their own reasons, they're all fucked and special and beautiful and wonderful.
There's no consistency in the job we do. It still feels like things are being pioneered 40 years, 50 years after the events that took place in this book. Then the start of the book is doing productions with no moving lights, doing concerts all with conventional fixtures that had to be individually focused every single night as they went city to city. But then about midway through the book, she talks about lights that could move on the fly and that could be programmed to do all sorts of different kinds of effects, and how technicians had to adapt and change. Every single gig that they did was absolutely different in that way. And even though we're so far beyond that point, and now maybe concert rigs are a little bit more consistent, it's musical theatre rigs that are the more niche and different, not just in every production but in every version of every production. And that's clearly what we do well with. You're talking about change. Thriving under pressure.
If you don't like change, don't do this.
You said, oh, well, that a stage manager has to feed that mic onto the lift, which sounds like a shit cue, by the way. And you're like, I could do that. I could help. That's the bit that I could actually help with. Like, you love it. Like, clearly, all of the differences and all of the challenges are what we actually crave about the job we do, which is very cool.
Because it's really rewarding. Like, I can't imagine just going somewhere where I know how to do the thing and doing that every single day. Where is the dopamine of succeeding at a thing, of learning a new thing, of achieving something that you didn't think that you could do before? Like, I find it so rewarding. And we're never going to not have that, because that big technology shift happened, you know, like in Tana's time, but it's still constantly happening. Technology does not stop evolving. So we're constantly going to be learning new things until they figure out how to replace us with robots, and then we're done.
They've tried, but it hasn't worked so well so far. They've tried the robo-spots, and they end up in the water. So, as in on Hosh. They end up pointed at the waves because they're moving as well as the actors. So, you know, I'm not particularly worried about job security right now, which is a huge thing to say for someone in this industry.
Is there a show or a job or a situation that you've been the proudest of?
I think probably the proudest I felt of where I'm at is when we were doing the production of Phantom at the Opera House. So after Hosh. It was a different production and it had been inherited from the UK, but for the first time I was a mech and I was working with a group of people I hadn't ever worked with before. I knew people like you in other departments, but in my department it was completely new, and they all knew each other and had worked together before. Getting to actually build the set, I was learning a new skill every single day. And all of my social skills were being put to the test in terms of trying to cohesively fit into this team of, you know, mostly burly blokey mechs that I had never worked with before. I felt so involved. I felt so hands-on, being able to mech and do really kind of tricky, difficult, challenging plots, PC things backstage, like that was a little different to doing a lighting plot. And I also was the technical swing, so I was in charge of writing those plots. I put together a lot of the tracks and things and at least augmented things to suit how we went in tech, and I felt so useful, so part of the team. But I was kind of using every skill I'd ever gleaned so far, but also learning something new every day. So I felt very challenged, but I also felt very validated and rewarded. I got to work with props too. I also got to write those two props plots. Gee, that was an example of a show that was different to how they did it on the last tour overseas. We'd inherited the touring UK version of the show, and they used to have 6 props plots, and we had 2.
I hate that so much. Knowing what that was like, I'm so sorry. Oh my God, I didn't know about the 6.
That quickly turned into 3 when we all collectively realized that it wasn't going to work. So I followed the head and deputy props respectively around while they were doing previews, wrote down every single thing they did, and they looked at it and went, holy shit, that's too much. So they hired an extra person. It just felt very rewarding to have so much kind of input into how the show was going to be running. Obviously, Phantom means so much to me, just like it does to you, and working in the Opera House. I've never worked in the Opera House before, so that was a first for me as well. And being able to walk to work down Circular Quay, past all the tourists, gawking in awe at the massive sails. And so that was like a lot of firsts, a lot of, kind of felt like a full circle moment doing Phantom at the Opera House, but everything was new, and I really loved my job. Those few months were just a whirlwind. So chaotic, so physically and mentally draining, but that's probably the proudest I've been of myself at work, I think. Being able to make it to that point, be so again in the deep end, even 5 years into the industry, that was really exciting. How about you?
One of them is just after we were in lockdown, like the first time, like the big COVID lockdown, and the industry was like slowly climbing out of its grave. Theatre was starting to come back because governments have invested money in theatre, very simply. So they wanted them to be back on. But for small venue gigs, it was like, and I was still doing those kind of gigs at the time. I got a call. I hadn't worked in months and months and months since like February or whenever we first went into lockdown and the world literally shut down. I got a call from someone on Halloween being like, this venue you've never worked at, we need someone to come in and mix a gig tonight for a band. It's like a Halloween show. You'll do 2 sets because it's Halloween, blah, blah, blah. Great. A venue I've never been in. I haven't mixed in like 8 months minimum. And I feel like every time I go in and mix bands, no matter how much time, it could be the day after, and I'll get there to like start sound check and I'm like, do I even know how to do this job anymore? Oh yeah, I do know how to do this. Like there's just this panic for some reason. I don't know what it is. I wonder if I'll ever grow out of it. I'd never been in the venue. They were like, someone can come before sound check and run you through where everything is, but they can't stay to help you with setup. They'll show you where everything is and then you're on your own. console I hadn't used before, lighting I hadn't used before, but it was a Digico, which is set out pretty similarly to other consoles I'd used. So I was like, oh, fuck, all right. But the thing that made me go, yes, okay, I will do it, is that the band that were playing I'd worked with before, and I loved Mountain Wizard Death Cult. Loved them. I loved working with them. And so I was like, okay, I have the safety net that these are like friends.
And they know you can do it.
That no, I don't have to prove myself to them, which gives me space to like figure out the rest of whatever the fuck is going on. Yeah. And it was an amazing show. Like, it was so much fun. They were so happy. Everyone was really happy with the gig. So many people came up and complimented me during the sets on how everything sounded and looked.
We love getting some validation.
Thank you so much.
That's great.
Not just oh my God, my cousin's brother's neighbor once lived next door to the guy who mixed for the Angels. Let me tell you all about it. To just like rock up to the worst possible situation and it turn out to be like a massive success was so satisfying and it squashed my imposter syndrome for at least a month, where I was like, I know what the fuck I'm doing. And I've built a rapport within the industry that not only someone called me up to do this, but also the people I'm working with already have faith in me because they know I can do it, which was just really wholesome.
Thriving under pressure. Both of our stories had that.
Working Phantom in the Opera House was also like a pinch me, like that's a I've made it moment in this kind of an industry. Opening night for that show felt like an event in my life. This was a core memory moment. It was all right, now I'm going to prepare a show to tour. Now I'm going to use what I know. It was the first time that I felt like I was a valued member of the team, where I was an integral part of the team, like you said, making plots and teaching other people and choosing what other people do, or like that kind of thing felt like a lot of pressure, but also felt really satisfying when it then worked. Solving problems backstage, being the person people would go to backstage, being the person who creates the mics all the leads, deals with all of that. That was a really satisfying experience. Celebrating that by having opening night at the Opera House at that point with friends who I'd made in the industry, and like in every department there was someone I'd worked with and was friends with from a previous show. So I felt like I belonged there. I think about this question constantly whenever I'm feeling sad or whenever something exciting is happening to me. And that is, what would 15-year-old you think about you and your life now? And if you had to give her any advice, what would you say?
That's wild to me, because I feel like as a teenager, I was very insecure, very focused on myself in the present right now. I don't think I even had, like, I was curious and I would think about the future, but it was all a big like, oh my God, if I even make it, like far out, I still need to get through year 11 first or whatever, you know? I definitely had big hopes and dreams, but I had no idea what I was actually going to fill my life with. I think 15-year-old me would be absolutely shocked and in awe of how confident I am, how happy I am, how many beautiful, gorgeous friends I have, and how successful I've been in skills that I didn't even know, existed yet, or were coming, or could even be something that I could possibly do. I had no idea. It wasn't that I had big hopes and dreams and then I achieved them like in exactly the way that I thought I would, or in a completely different way. I just really didn't know what I was going to get up to. So I think she would be extremely shook, basically. She would see the photo of me, like, having had Phantom be such a big part of like growing up and being a cool, fun thing, like a quirky thing that, Dad used to do. She would see me refilling all the pyro in the chandelier one day. Absolutely flabbergasted, I reckon. She was very like focused on her small world of just trying to get people to perceive her in a certain way, trying to be confident or be liked or be, a people pleaser, that kind of thing. She just wanted to survive. And now I've been able to grow up and be not insular. I think she would be very proud and very excited because she gets to turn into me, duh. And I think the advice would just be, fuck around and find out, because that's what worked. That's what worked.
The
just
slogan of your career.
Give it a crack and like fake it till you make it. If you have imposter syndrome, pretend you don't, because nobody's actually looking at you that much. Yeah, maybe ask more questions at first, because then I think I would have gained confidence quicker if I just realized that there is no such thing as a stupid question, and hanging around in the background waiting to be told what to do is not a good way to be proactive and learn. You really can fuck around and find out, especially in this industry. And it's about the kind of person you are and your willingness to learn and look at what's around you and make the best with what you've got. That's all you really need. Stressing and worrying about not having a certain quality or not having a certain plan isn't going to serve you. So just, fuck around and find out.
If you haven't already shared them, we need to hear your thoughts on this month's book. In order to have spoiler-free chats about the books that we're reading, we are using the book club app Fable. It's free, it's quick and easy to make an account and keep up to date with the Girls on Tour book club. There are 2 separate book clubs, one for the non-fiction book and one for the fiction books. Make sure you head over to our Instagram, TikTok and YouTube page at the start of every month to see what book is coming next. Thank you for listening and thank you for watching if you're watching this on YouTube.